You know that old saying that has been floating around Silicon Valley for a while? We wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters.
It's the classic tagline for modern disappointment. And it stings a little bit because it's true.
It really, really does. And it sums up this massive problem that we are going to wrestle off today. I mean, imagine for a second that you actually want to build the future.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean just, making a slightly faster iPhone or a dating app that uses a slightly different algorithm to find you a bad date.
Right.
I mean, building something that fundamentally shifts the trajectory of the human species. How do you actually do it?
It's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? And, most of us are taught from the time we're in kindergarten that the answer is competition.
Oh, yeah.
You look at what the person next to you is doing, you try to do it a little bit better, you fight for market share, you iterate, you hustle.
Right. Survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
The jungle.
But if you listen to Peter Thiel, that is exactly the wrong approach. In fact, he would argue that if you are competing, you have already lost.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a modern classic and, frankly, a bit of a controversial manifesto, 0 to 1, Notes on Startups or How to Build the Future by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters.
And this isn't just a business book. I mean, if you treat it like a manual for how to register an LLC, you are completely missing the point.
Totally.
It's a critique of how we think. It's a philosophy book that's just, disguised as business advice.
It really is. And looking at the sources we have, the book itself, the lectures Blake Masters took notes on at Stanford, which actually became the book, and some of Thiel's other essays, we're looking at a philosophy that says, stop copying, stop competing, and start planning.
It challenges almost every piece of conventional wisdom we have about innovation. And the core premise, the thing we really have to nail down before we go anywhere else, is the title itself.
Right.
The difference between 0 to 1 and 1 to N.
Right. Okay, let's unpack that right off the bat. It sounds like binary code or maybe some math equation, but he's talking about history here.
He is. So 1 to N is what he calls horizontal progress. It's basically globalization. You take something that works somewhere, let's say a typewriter, and you just make more of them, or you send them to new markets.
You're copying.
You're copying things that work. You're moving from 1 to N. You're adding to the quantity of something that is already known.
So you aren't inventing the wheel, you're just putting wheels on more wagon.
Exactly. It's familiar, it's comfortable, it's generally speaking low risk. But 0 to 1 is vertical progress.
Okay.
It's doing something nobody has ever done before. It's looking at that typewriter and saying, no, I'm not going to make a cheaper typewriter. I'm going to build a word processor.
Right.
Or looking at a horse and buggy and deciding to build a car. When you do that, you aren't competing with the old thing. You are rendering the old thing obsolete. You are creating a singular event in history.
It's a step function change, a total leap.
Right. And Thiel's core argument is that we are obsessed with 1 to N. We love globalization. We love franchising. But we have, for the most part, stopped doing the hard work of 0 to 1.
And that leads to this massive mission statement of the deep dive today. We're going to explore why competition is actually destructive, which, goes against everything I learned in sports and school.
Everything.
Why monopolies, which we usually think of as the bad guys, are actually the only ones driving real progress, and why our entire society seems to have lost the ability to plan for the future.
It is a dense philosophy, but it all starts with a very simple, very famous interview question that Thiel loves to ask people.
Oh, I love this question. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
It sounds simple, right? It sounds like a fun dinner party starter. But try to answer it. Seriously, if you're listening, take a second.
It's incredibly hard. My instinct is to say something like, oh, the education system is broken, or politics is polarized.
But who disagrees with that?
Exactly. Everyone nods. If I say that at a dinner party, the whole table says, so true.
Precisely. And if you answer with something everyone nods their head at, you haven't found a truth. You found conventional wisdom. Thiel says this question is the gateway to the future.
How so?
Because the future is just the set of things that are different from today. If you agree with everyone else, you're just maintaining the status quo. To build a 0 to 1 company, you have to find a secret, a truth that the rest of the world has missed. You have to be a contrarian, but not just for the sake of being difficult. You have to be right when everyone else is wrong.
Okay, so let's dig into this progress idea a bit more. We talked about the typewriter versus the word processor, but Thiel has a pretty bleak view of where we are right now, doesn't he? I mean, he argues we haven't actually seen much progress lately.
He does. He calls it the stagnation hypothesis, and he argues that since about 1971, we have seen this rapid globalization spreading things around, but very limited technological development.
Really? That
Yeah.
seems counterintuitive.
Well, he says the only major exception is the world of bits. Computers, IT, the internet, that has improved exponentially. But look at the world of atoms. Look at transportation, energy, medicine.
Yeah, let's look at transportation. In the 70s, we had the Concorde. We could fly supersonic across the Atlantic. Now,
Now the Concorde is in a museum.
Mm.
And we fly at the same speeds we did in 1970, just with, less legroom.
that's a great point.
Or look at energy. We were promised nuclear fusion, or at least cheap, abundant nuclear fission. Instead, we're still largely burning fossil fuels, just slightly more efficiently. We have these sleek screens in our pockets, but the physical world around us hasn't changed nearly as much as we think it has.
So we have a Star Trek computer in our pocket, but we're living in a Flintstones infrastructure.
That's a really good way to put it. And the danger, he says, is that if we just keep doing globalization, just spreading our existing methods without new technology, we were just duplicating unsustainable practice.
Right.
If every person in the world lives like a wealthy American today, using 1970s technology, we ruin the planet. We simply run out of resources. We need vertical progress, new technology, to do more with less.
And this is where the startup comes in. Why does he think startups are the only ones who can fix this? I mean,
Yeah.
why can't the government or a massive corporation like GE solve these 0 to 1 problems?
It comes down to structural constraints. Big organizations are slow, they're bureaucratic, they are designed to protect what they already have, not to risk it all on something new and unproven.
Yeah,
If you are a middle manager at a huge corporation, you don't get promoted for taking a massive risk that might fail. You get promoted for optimizing the current process.
right. You're just making the one-to-end process a little bit better.
Exactly. And on the other hand, a lone genius in a garage usually doesn't have the resources to change an entire industry, so a startup sits in this kind of Goldilocks zone.
I like that.
And Thiel defines a startup as the largest group of people you can convince of a plan to build a different future. It's small enough to move fast and think clearly, but big enough to actually execute on that plan.
I love that definition. It's not about beanbags and free beer. It's about a shared plan to build a different future. Okay, but let's get to the most controversial part of his thesis,
Mm-hmm.
the economics. We are taught in Econ 101 that competition is good, it keeps prices low, it keeps companies honest. Thiel says competition is for losers. Why?
This flips economics completely on its head. In standard economic theory, the ideal state is perfect competition.
Which sounds great. I mean, perfect. Who doesn't want perfection?
It sounds great for the consumer, maybe? But think about what that means if you're a business owner. If there's perfect competition, it means you sell a product that is exactly the same as everyone else's.
You're a commodity.
You're a commodity. You have to fight for every customer. And eventually, prices get driven down to the marginal cost of production. That means your profit is effectively zero.
You're just surviving. You're treading water.
You are fighting for survival every single day. You can't plan for the future. You can't pay your workers better. And you certainly can't invest billions in research and development because you don't have the margin. You're trapped in the present.
He uses the airline industry as the prime example here, right?
Yes, and it's a brutal but perfect comparison. Airlines create massive value. We can fly across the ocean in hours. It's a miracle.
It really is.
But because airlines are in such fierce competition, they capture almost none of that value. For decades, the profit per passenger trip was measured in pennies. They are constantly going bankrupt. Now, compare that to Google.
Right. The complete opposite.
Google is a monopoly. Now, they don't like to use that word, but they own the search market. And
Right.
because they have no real competition in their core business, they make massive profits. And what do they do with that money? They don't just bank it. They fund moonshots. They try to build self-driving cars. They research life extension. They provide free internet access. Thiel's point is that monopolies are actually good for society because the security of a monopoly allows a company to innovate.
That is such a counterintuitive point.
Mm-hmm.
We usually think monopolies are just sitting there, raising prices and smoking cigars.
Right, the Monopoly man from the board game.
Yeah. But he's saying the only way to have the capital and the breathing room to do 0 to 1 innovation is to escape that dogfight of competition.
Precisely. And this leads to a very funny dynamic that Thiel points out regarding the lies companies tell.
Oh, this part cracked me up. It's the monopolist's lie versus the competitor's lie.
Right. So if you are a monopoly like Google, you do not want the government to regulate you or break you up. You want to stay under the radar. So you lie. You say, oh, we aren't a search monopoly. We're just one tech company in a massive global advertising market. We compete with TV, with newspapers, with billboards. They define their market as broadly as possible to make themselves look small.
They try to hide the monopoly. Look how tiny we are in this giant pond.
But the non-monopolies, the businesses that are struggling in competitive markets, they do the exact opposite. They tell the competitors lie. They want to pretend they're special. So they define their market incredibly narrowly.
This is the example of the restaurant in Palo Alto.
Yes. Suppose you open a restaurant. You don't want to say, I am one of 1,000 restaurants in the city. That sounds like a terrible business. Investors will run away. So you say, we are the only British-Peruvian fusion restaurant in downtown Palo Alto.
Right.
You make up a category where you're the only player, just to pretend you have a monopoly.
You slice the data until you're the only one left standing.
Exactly. But the reality is, if a customer just wants food, they can go anywhere. You are fooling yourself. And Thiel says fooling yourself is the first step to failure.
So the takeaway is, don't fake a monopoly. Actually build one. But how? I mean, if I'm listening to this and I want to build a 0-to-1 company, surely I can't just snap my fingers and be Google.
No. And in fact, trying to be Google from day one is a recipe for failure. Thiel's strategy is very specific and, again, kind of counterintuitive. Start small.
Small.
You want to dominate a tiny niche market first.
Like Amazon did.
Exactly. Jeff Bezos didn't start by saying, I'm going to sell everything to everyone. That would have been insane. He said, I'm going to sell books.
Just books?
Just books. They're easy to ship. There are millions of them. And physical bookstores can't possibly stock them all. He dominated the online book market completely. He became a monopoly in that niche. And only then did he expand to CDs, then electronics, and eventually, well, everything.
Facebook is another classic example. It wasn't for the world initially.
It wasn't even for all colleges. It was just for Harvard. Getting 60% of the student body at Harvard to sign up is a monopoly in a very small pond. Then they went to other Ivy Leagues, then all colleges, then the world. The mistake most people make is aiming for a massive market like the U.S. restaurant market, which is a $1 trillion market, and they think if they just get 1% of that, they'll be rich.
Yeah, that's the classic pitch deck slide.
It is, but the competition in a massive market is fierce. You will get crushed. You want to be a big fish in a small pond and then make the pond bigger.
And to do that, you need some specific characteristics, right? He lists 4 big ones: proprietary technology, network effects, economies of scale, and branding.
Right. And that proprietary technology hurdle is high. He says your tech needs to be at least 10 times better than the closest substitute.
10 times, not 10%.
10 times, 10x.
Yeah.
If it's only slightly better, people won't go through the hassle of switching. You need to be undeniably, overwhelmingly superior to escape competition.
Okay, so we know we need to build a monopoly, and we know we need to start small, but there's a mental shift that has to happen first. This leads us to the section on optimism and planning. This part really blew my mind because it explains so much about how our current generation thinks versus, say, our grandparents' generation.
It's the concept of definite versus indefinite optimism. It's a framework he uses to explain how a society views the future.
So let's break these down. What was the definite optimism of the past?
Think about the 1950s and 60s in America. That was definite optimism. People believed the future would be better, but, and this is the important part, they believed it would be better because they had a specific plan to make it better.
A plan.
The Apollo program is the perfect example. Kennedy said, we are going to the moon in this decade. That is a definite plan. We reorganized society, resources, and engineering to hit that specific target. We built the interstate highway system. We built the Hoover Dam. These were multi-year, specific visions of a better future.
And today?
Today, Thiel argues we live in an age of indefinite optimism. We still think the future will probably be better. We're generally optimistic, but we have no idea how it will happen.
Let's just happen.
We just hope that progress will naturally occur. We treat the future like a lottery ticket. We just hope we get lucky. We don't make concrete plans.
He relates this directly to how students behave, which really hit home for me. This idea of the well-rounded student.
Yes. If you are an indefinite optimist, you don't know what the future holds, so what do? You try to keep your options open. You build a resume that has a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I did that.
You get good grades, you play an instrument, you do sports, you volunteer, you are diversifying your skills for optionality. You're preparing for any possible future rather than trying to build a specific future.
Optionality. That word is everywhere. I feel like my whole life has been about maximizing optionality.
And that's the trap. Thiel argues that optionality is just a fancy way of saying you have no idea what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you spend your whole life just keeping doors open, you end up standing in the hallway. You never actually walk through one of the doors. You become average at everything instead of exceptional at one thing.
And the finance world, he says, is the epitome of this.
Finance is the ultimate indefinite industry. You make money by betting on liquidity and flexibility. You don't bet on one specific company to change the world. You create a diversified portfolio so that no matter what happens, you make a little bit of money.
You're hedging.
You're hedging. And Thiel hates this. He says this lack of conviction is why we aren't building flying cars or curing cancer faster. We are just hedging our bets against the future instead of building it.
So the fix is to return to definite planning, to basically say, I am going to build this specific thing and put all your energy and focus behind that one vision.
Correct. And he says, a startup is the largest endeavor over which you can have definite mastery. You can't control the whole world, but you can control your company's mission and plan.
This connects directly to the power law, which is another concept that I think people struggle with because our brains just aren't wired for it.
Our brains are wired for the bell curve. In a bell curve, most things are average, extremes are rare, height is a perfect bell curve. Most people are average height. Very few are 7 feet tall or 4 feet tall.
Right.
But in the world of startups, technology, and venture capital, the bell curve doesn't apply. The power law applies. And this is basically the 80-20 rule on steroids.
Okay, so give us the venture capital reality check here. How does that work?
So a venture capitalist invests in, let's say, 10 companies. In a bell curve world, you'd expect most of them to do okay, a few to fail, and a few to do really well.
Seems reasonable.
But in reality, what actually happens is the single best investment in the fund will often outperform the entire rest of the fund combined.
That is wild. So one company makes more money than the other 9 put together.
More than all of them combined. Exactly. Thiel saw this with PayPal, and then again as an early investor in Facebook. If you look at his portfolio, the winners are exponentially bigger than the losers. The losers go to zero. The winners go to billions. There's no middle ground.
So what does that mean for us, the listeners? I mean, we aren't all venture capitalists.
It means we should stop trying to be well-rounded and stop hedging our bets with our lives. If the power law is true, then one single choice you make, one career path you take, one skill you master, one company you start, will likely matter more than everything else combined.
Wow.
So you should focus intensely on finding that one thing that has exponential potential rather than spreading yourself thin across 10 things that have low linear potential. Every person is an investor, Thiel says. You invest your time. Don't diversify your time into mediocrity. Double down on your unique strength.
That is profound advice, but it's also terrifying advice. It puts a lot of pressure on picking the right thing.
It does. But Thiel would say the risk of picking nothing, of just floating along with optionality, is even worse, because you guarantee you'll never achieve anything great.
Okay, let's move from the philosophy to the nuts and bolts. We've got a 0-to-1 idea. We're ready to plan. We're thinking in power law terms. How do we actually build the startup?
Thiel puts a huge emphasis on the very beginning, the founding moment.
He compares the founding of a startup to the Big Bang or the U.S. Constitutional Convention.
No small comparison.
No. It's this unique moment in time where the rules are set. And the scary part is, once those rules are set, they're incredibly hard to change. If you have a flaw in your foundation, like a bad equity split between co-founders or a toxic early culture, it will likely kill the company years down the line. You can't fix a bad foundation.
And the most important part of that foundation is the team, specifically the co-founders.
He says choosing a co-founder is like getting married.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't just marry the first person you meet at a networking event.
Hopefully not. But people do that with startups all the time. They find a stranger who has complementary skills and say, let's start a company. Thiel says, this is just rolling the dice. You need history. You need to know how this person handles stress. Do you actually like working with them?
He mentions the PayPal Mafia here.
Yeah.
That group is legendary. I mean, you've got Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, the YouTube guys, the Yelp guys. They all came out of PayPal.
And that wasn't an accident. They hired people who were culturally similar, not in terms of looking the same, but in terms of being obsessed with the same nerdy problems. It was a tribe.
The tribe.
And a tribe is stronger than a regular company. They had a shared language, they had a shared enemy in the banking system, and they were tighter than a typical 9-to-5 workforce.
One specific tactical thing he mentions regarding the team is alignment. He breaks this down into ownership, possession, and control. Can we define those?
Sure. Ownership is who holds the equity, the financial value of the company. That's usually founders and investors. Possession is who actually does the work day to day, the employees and managers. And control is who governs the company, the board of directors.
And the danger is when these get mixed up or misaligned.
Right. Think about a government bureaucracy like the DMV. The owners are the taxpayers, the possession is the clerks behind the counter, the control is the politicians. None of those groups have the same incentives.
Not at all.
The clerks don't care about the taxpayers' equity, they just want to get through the day. That's why it's so dysfunctional. In a startup, you need those to be as tight as possible. And specifically, Thiel argues you need a very small board of directors, 3 to 5 people max. If you have a board of 10 people, nothing gets done. You need a small group that can make decisive moves.
And then there's the cash trap. This is a rule I've heard cited so many times in Silicon Valley, the CEO salary rule.
The rule is a startup CEO should never pay themselves more than $150,000 a year.
Even if they used to make millions at Google or something.
Doesn't matter. And the reason isn't just about saving money, it's about psychology. If a CEO is paying themselves a high cash salary, say $500,000, they start thinking like a politician.
How so?
They want to protect the status quo so that fat paycheck keeps coming in. They become risk averse. But if they have a low salary and a lot of equity stock, their only way to get rich is if the company succeeds in the long term. It aligns them to the value of the company, not the cash in the bank. High cash compensation encourages short-term thinking.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, shifting gears to one of the most misunderstood parts of business. Sales. Thiel says engineers in particular have a massive blind spot here. They think, if I build it, they will come.
It's the classic field of dreams fallacy. In Silicon Valley, sales is almost a dirty word. Techies think that if a product is good enough, it should just sell itself. If you have to sell it, it must be a bad product. Thiel says this is just dead wrong. Distribution, how you get the product to the customer, is just as hard and just as important as the product design itself.
And he has this great insight that the best sales are invisible.
That's why engineers miss it. Great sales doesn't look like sales. It doesn't look like a guy in a cheap suit trying to sell you a used car. When an investment banker sells a company for billions, it looks like a high-level consultation. When a politician sells themselves, it looks like a speech on values. Thiel says, if you don't see any salespeople in your organization, you are this salesperson.
There's also this concept of the dead zone in sales that a lot of startups fall into. What is that?
It's a pricing trap. It's all about the math of customer acquisition. So if you sell a product for $100, like a consumer gadget, you can use marketing and ads. You can spend $20 on Facebook ads to get a $100 customer. The math works.
Okay.
And if you sell a product for $10 million, like a rocket engine, you can hire a dedicated sales team to fly around and do steak dinners. You can spend $100,000 acquiring that customer because the deal is worth $10 million.
Oh, the middle is the problem.
The middle is the problem.
Right.
If your product costs, say, $5,000, you are in trouble. It's too expensive for people to just buy from seeing an ad. They need to talk to someone. They need a demo.
Sure.
But the price point isn't high enough to pay for a salesperson's salary and commission and travel expenses. You do go broke. That dead zone between about $1,000 and $10,000 kills a lot of companies because they have no distribution strategy that works for that price point.
That is a huge practical nugget for anyone listening who is pricing a product right now. Watch out for the dead zone.
Absolutely. It's a killer.
Now, let's talk about the robots. Everyone is freaking out about AI right now. Will it take our jobs? Will it replace us? Thiel wrote this back in 2014, but his take is incredibly relevant today.
He argues that computers are complements, not substitutes. This is a crucial economic distinction. A substitute replaces you. A complement makes you better.
Like a hammer complements a carpenter.
Exactly. The hammer doesn't replace the carpenter. It allows the carpenter to do their job better and faster. Thiel argues that humans and computers are good at fundamentally different things.
Which are?
Computers are amazing at processing massive amounts of data and finding patterns. Humans are good at complex judgment, understanding context, and figuring out intent. The most value comes when you combine them.
He uses the PayPal fraud story here, which is fascinating.
Yeah, they had this huge problem with credit card fraud from the Russian mob, losing millions. First, they tried to use just humans to catch it, but there's too much data, it was impossible.
Right.
Then they tried to use just algorithms, but the fraudsters were smart and kept changing their tactics, fooling the computers. The solution, and Palantir, his other company, was born from this logic too, was a
A
hybrid.
hybrid system.
The computer scans millions of transactions and flags the weird ones. They called it the Igor system. Then a human expert looks at just those few flagged ones and makes the final judgment call. That combination turned massive losses into huge profits. The future isn't man versus machine, it's man plus machine.
So don't fear the AI. Use the AI to do the boring data crunching stuff so you can do the high-level creative thinking.
Exactly. Let the machine do what it's good at so you can do what you're good at.
All right, we are coming toward the end, but we have to touch on the founder's paradox. This is more about the psychology of the people who build these companies. Thiel notices that founders are, well, they're kind of weird.
They are. If you look at a distribution of personality traits, most people are in the middle of the bell curve. Founders tend to be at the extremes, and often simultaneously.
What do you mean?
They might be incredibly charismatic, but also socially awkward. They're insiders running the company, but outsiders in how they think. They are often extremely wealthy, but live very simply, or vice versa. They're bundles of contradictions.
And society has a really weird relationship with them. We treat them like royalty, but we also love to tear them down.
It's the ancient scapegoat mechanism. We need these people to break the rules and build the future, so we worship them as gods. Think of Steve Jobs in the early days, this messianic figure.
Totally.
But because they are rule breakers, when things go wrong, we blame them for everything and turn them into monsters. Steve Jobs was exiled from Apple as a tyrant. Bill Gates was attacked by the government for antitrust.
So Richard Branson's another one. He plays up this whole adventurer persona.
He does, and it works brilliantly for the brand. But the lesson for founders is a dangerous one. You need to be singular and a bit weird to succeed, but you have to be careful not to believe your own mythology. If you start thinking you are actually a god, you will self-destruct. And if the public turns on you, they will tear you apart. It's a very high-wire act to walk.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the mechanics of monopolies to the philosophy of optimism. If we had to boil this all down, what are the big actionable takeaways?
I think first, innovation is 0 to 1, not 1 to n. Stop copying, create something new. Second, competition is for losers. Your goal should be to build a monopoly by dominating a small niche first.
Okay.
Third, reclaim definite optimism. Have a concrete plan for the future, don't just drift and hope. And finally, understand the power law. Focus your energy on the few things that can yield exponential returns, not the many things that won't.
It's a call to action, to stop drifting and start planning, to start building.
It really is. It's an invitation to stop looking at what your neighbor is doing and start looking at what the world needs but doesn't have yet.
So here is the provocative thought we want to leave you with today. We talked about how companies need to be monopolies to succeed. But what about you? Look at your own career. Are you competing with thousands of other people who have the exact same resume as you? Are you fighting for scraps in a crowded market? Or are you building a monopoly of one?
Are you building a set of skills and a reputation that is so unique, so 0 to 1, that no one can compete with you because there is no one else who does exactly what you do? That is the personal challenge of 0 to 1.
Find your secret. Build your monopoly. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you in the future.
See you there.